Hi, everyone.
Okay.
It's really exciting tonight. So, wow, I feel this is the key to the age of brilliance and to our flourishing in life. So, tonight we have Manu Marielle is going to share with us her guidance on the Age of Brilliance, Part 14, and it's the portal of liberation. Dissolving illusion, anchoring freedom. And it's not just healing, it's liberation. At the level of your soul, the bindings are breaking, the illusions are dissolving, and the unshakable you is ready to emerge. In this profound transmission, we're going to discover what liberation truly is and what it is not, how dissolution clears the path to your brilliance, the 12 anchors of liberation that unlock coherence and power, how to collapse timelines through anchored freedom, one potent practice to dissolve uncertainty and reclaim your field. You are not here to repeat history. You are here to liberate the future by living freely now. So here we go. Another brilliant session with our beloved Manu Marielle.
Thank you, Sarah. So if there are any questions or observations, just feel free to interrupt me, and I will also reach out to you from time to time. And you take care of the waiting room
Yes.
and people in. Thank you. Yes, so we have the Age of Brilliance series that I'm working with, and I was telling Sarah, because every week, sometimes even an hour or so before our session, I wouldn't necessarily know what I'm talking about as such in depth. And certainly, I would very rarely know the night before what I will be talking about. But I have actually been, that there are 26 portals that anchor the Age of Brilliance, and they are present throughout the Age of Brilliance. And some parts of the world, they will be more potent than others from time to time. And it will depend on where humanity is. I mean, we really are quite special, having this human form. So let's begin with the portal of liberation. What is liberation? So, liberation is a release from false identities, from limiting constructs and karmic entanglements. It's a release, it's not an escape from something. In fact, what it is it is a return to the self that is already free. True liberation is when the inner world is no longer at war with itself. I mean, really, every sentence is massive. Liberation is not passive. It is a bold reclamation of truth, a disentanglement from fear-based loops, and an embrace of one's infinite creative power. I just sat with this actually for, a few days when I first got to know about this in the context of liberation being a portal. I really got that running away from something doesn't actually feel liberating. You're like in the entanglement of as running away. So even this understanding of it, I mean, I wrote it, recorded it, listened to it several times over until I could feel it in my being. returning to the self that is already free. The fact that liberation is not passive, but it's a bold reclamation of truth, really has us be one with our higher self at all times. Now, the age of brilliance isn't about letting go. It isn't about any huge processes, as you've heard me say before. It is all about dissolving. So remember, we talked about, walk around as if you have a dissolving bucket. So my question was, okay, how does dissolution or dissolving enable liberation? So dissolution, it is quite a sacred unraveling. What it does is when you dissolve something, illusions start to fade. It is a soft and a certain activity. Illusions start to fade. Attachments soften. You become really unattached in many ways to stories that you may be believing in. It gives you the freedom to rewrite stories if that's what is called for. It also creates an opening for any outdated energies to complete. So dissolution is necessary because as the dissolving takes place, liberation is revealed, not constructed. As we dissolve distortion, our original state, the state of brilliance rises and stabilizes. And that's why it is really important. And I talk about, the 12 anchors for liberation. So let's just get into, well, what does anchoring liberation actually mean? To anchor liberation means to make freedom your new default setting, a lived embodiment, not a peak experience, but a lived embodiment. And how it'll show up is you no longer are triggered by what once controlled you. You're not seeking any permission to exist. You do because you choose to, and you own that choice. You're free to move, you're free to speak, choose, create from your source. You're able to literally glide and flow and be present, interact, engage, transact in your mastery. Anchored liberation activates coherence. It activates time collapse and limitless expression. And in its limitless expression, you're able to really reclaim your destiny. So with this as the foundation, let's look at the 12 anchors of liberation. I'm also very conscious that my computer should be charging and it is not. So let me just see if the plug point needs readjustment. So give me a moment. Yes, it's done. So let's go into the 12 anchors of liberation. I'm going to just go through these. And if we complete them all today, great. If we don't, we will continue next week. So each anchor It removes a chain, it restores your natural frequency and activates time collapse. And it does so by aligning you with the now of your brilliance. That is how each anchor operates. So the first one is a knowingness, and each one is really a knowingness. And that's how it becomes an anchor. The first one is, I am already free. Now, before you have anchored this, you are in a state where you're seeking freedom from circumstances. If only this could be, if only that could be. Or if only was not here, whatever. You're basically seeking freedom from circumstances. And this quest for freedom is what is driving you. When you anchor the knowingness that I already am free, the reality is you are, because who you are is a soul being that is having a human experience. So at a soul being level, you already are free. Whatever you may feel or experience in this body, at a soul being, you already are free. So what the experience you have after you anchor this, you activate this anchor of liberation, immediately your way of being shifts. And it's as if you start living from inherent freedom, because that is so. You will experience that in a click of a moment. You may go back, and this is where the challenge comes in. You may go immediately back and find it hard to let go of the victim story. So that can happen. That is a challenge. Reconnect to the anchor of the knowingness that I already am free. The victim story will dissolve. And what happens the moment that dissolves, the benefit of this is that you immediately return to being at the source of your life. You, in fact, return to source and the source that is you and that is within you. A simple mirror exercise practice might be a good one for this one, which is really look into your own eyes. You know, I'm already free is all you have to say to yourself. And as you do that, even looking at your own eyes, you start connecting to that which you already are. That is a fact. I did the mirror exercise, actually, looking at, I have to, you know, uh, make this compromise. I need to make that compromise. And I couldn't even look at myself because it was a lie. Even though at that point in time, the have to and the need to felt very necessary. But I was not able to look into my eyes and say that. I am already free, on the other hand. I could look into my eyes and just be with myself because this is so. So just have a go with it, just play with it. It's such a simple practice. We look in the mirror, as women sometimes to do makeup or even when you're brushing your teeth, you can think this, I'm already free. I'm always looking for practices that I don't have to add on to my already elaborate morning practice. The time collapse impact that this has, because you're now not in a battle zone. You've reclaimed your power. So as a result, momentum accelerates because you say so, not because somebody external has given you permission to accelerate your momentum. It starts to occur. We are currently engaged in a fairly significant program in another part of the world. And I've come to Dubai actually just for a couple of days. So I'm happy that I'm starting this session at 4:30, not 3:30. And everybody said to us that you have to make sure that you have sufficient cash flow and working capital because these people pay, but they take a long time, sometimes even a year or two to pay. And of course, the mind goes into we just need to make sure that we allow ourselves to be properly covered in our agreements and things like that. And it didn't feel good actually to me to be engaged in that conversation. I did delegate that on for other people to put the necessary clauses in. And we were told that it doesn't matter what clause you have, this is the government is the one that has the power, and this is just the way they work. Um, you know, they deliver, but it takes a while. So I just thought, okay, I'm really going to not fall into that trap of accepting that perception of somebody else as my truth. Because when I felt into it, it was like, yeah, we should go ahead and do this work. I mean, the amazing thing is that, even before we landed there, we had 40% of the money already paid to us. The second installment was to come in 10 days' time. It came in 14 days' time, just because our weekends are different. So it just took a little bit of extended time on account of that. I do, and the momentum clearly kept accelerating because I wasn't trapped by, oh my God, we have such a big team here and we are invested in this. The second portion should come in on time. To me, there was an inner knowingness. It already was there. And it came from this particular anchor. I'm already free. And all I have to do is show up and do and deliver that which makes my heart sing. So let's look at the second anchor. The second anchor, it's a big one actually for the age of brilliance, which is release to receive. If I'm just taking the example that I just talked about, if I hadn't released this perception that was shared by many people that had experienced that which we were about to enter, if I hadn't just released it, dissolved it as, okay, we've done what we needed to at a contractual level. We've done that. Now, are we going to do this work or not? And yes, we will not do it if the first part of the payment doesn't arrive, which is going to arrive about 10 days prior. And it actually did arrive, 11 or 12 days prior. But rather than have a dialogue to and fro about what everybody else was saying, it was, I chose to release however that dialoguing from several sources had impacted my field. So before you'd release to receive, the scenario could be that you're holding tightly to your perception of reality or somebody else's perception of reality. You're holding tightly to, points of view around people or roles or identities. And Sarah, you probably can see this occurring in one particular area of your life where this is showing up again and again. But this is how the before scenario would be. Now, once you release, it opens the space for miracles to occur. I mean, the same people keep saying, wow, this is a miracle. And, I gracefully receive that. Now, there is a challenge that we could come up, that could prevent us from remaining anchored in the release to receive, which is the fear of losing. Fear of losing something that might have defined our identity for so many years. Being right about something. There is a fear. Who am I without that story? Who am I without the one that was impacted so severely by that experience? So there can be a fear of loss. Now, here, all you have to do is to reconnect to what fear is, which is false expectations appearing real. Simply acknowledging the false expectations that are appearing real to you, they will dissolve. So releasing to receiving, the payback is massive. It's like literally new timelines appear. Energies enter with complete grace to support you. Your own inner vitality is one of those energies that enters with grace for you to keep moving forward. You will notice it. If you have got any form of physical ailments, you will start noticing a transformation there. And I was looking about what's the practice. And I mean, my practices that I have here in these anchors really are hacks in the sense that they are stuff that I can integrate very easily with what I already do. I do have a breathing practice. So in this case, I release is a breath of surrender. And what delivered to me, because I've had a little bit of a situation of unwinding the relationship with one of my business partners. So the breath of surrender to a higher knowing has been something that has helped me quite a lot. And I've found that 7 deep inhales and long exhales, which is just a little longer than the inhale, in my mind with the exhale, visualizing, I release. Just 7 times, something shifts. And how the time collapse shows up is the impact is, it feels almost instant. Synchronicities flood in. I had I had this unwinding that needed to happen with this business partner that included the company, included the transfer of IPR assets, but it also meant that it included, shutting off of that bank account, getting a new residence visa, and getting my Emirates ID before I traveled. And I only had a few days to achieve all of this. Even if I attempted to figure out how this was all going to happen, it wouldn't have happened. Because following the way the process had been followed, step by step, and how long steps took in the past might not have delivered this. So there was no point in engaging with that. I just stayed with the intention, the time collapse intention of everything will just show up exactly as it's meant to. I envision myself with my new Emirates ID going through immigration as I boarded the flight into this new country where I was going to be based for about a month. And it was time collapse that delivered, like the even the agent that was working with me in terms of getting the new visa and stuff, it couldn't be that process could not begin until the old one had been stopped. And everybody said it takes so long to close a company, and which it does. It has done in the past. For some reason, the company jurisdiction decided to become very supportive and accelerate everything. And it all closed very fast. The bank closed the bank account also very fast. There was no issues with that. And the agent made the necessary applications following the process. But the responses were like magic, they just kept happening. And sure enough, I traveled with my new Emirates ID. So this is what happens with this. The breath really helped. It was a very simple practice. I could do it easily, you know. And during the time where the unwinding with the business partner was occurring, there was lots of stuff that would show up to release. So I'm not saying that it wasn't there. It was there. But for me, release became a critical path to receive. And what was I attempting to receive? Synchronicities to enable the time collapse impact. So, I don't even know how to teach somebody else to do this other than just maintain the purity of your intention and be there in the impact of that intention already being realized. Doing whatever else that will support you. The breath release really does. To me, it anchors my soul presence, really makes me one with my human form, because this is where all of this is going to occur. I'm going to continue with the third one, then if you have any points of view or any questions or clarifications, I'll pause and ask you, Sarah. So the third anchor is neutral is power. Neutral is power. This is a big one. Oh my God. At a soul level, we are neutral. That is true. But we are also, and that is what gives us the limitlessness, the indestructible quality of it, the experience of being unstoppable. Now, before you accept that neutral is power, as this, remember, what are we talking about? Anchors to activate liberation. Neutral is power. Now, before neutral is power becomes our reality, we are in the space of reaction, polarity, entanglement. It happens to all of us. Now, once you accept neutral is power, just even this statement, neutral is power, to me, it activates like a centered presence in chaos. And it's as if you can see through the nuance, the 0.01% that is yours to do. And that becomes your next step. And once you've done that, you take the next step after that. But being without the centered presence, we are navigating, sometimes, stepping over landmines in amidst all the chaos that is going on. And we don't have to be the ones that create the chaos. There's more than enough evidence around us that we can take on as our own, and then we enter the minefield of chaos. even in the midst of a minefield, having that centered presence makes a huge difference. I was just sharing the other day, I was about to start a session. There were 100 people in the audience, and it was quite like a grand setting. And this is going to be a 3-hour session. And it was only just a couple of hours prior to that, I heard about the bombings that took place in Syria and Lebanon. And, here in Dubai, one of Eleo's very good friends, they go for vacation to Lebanon. They live in Lebanon. But they live in Dubai, but their families are in Lebanon. So all of the vacations are spent there. And, they have the family owns Michelin star restaurants in Dubai and in London. And they've opened a couple of really amazing places in Lebanon as well. So, and I do remember having a conversation with Ryan, the father, before he left. And I was saying, you've invested in such an upmarket restaurant in the skiing resort area of Lebanon, and all of this war is going on. And he said, well, this has been going on from the time that I was a child, and we've just learned to realize that we can tell which missile matters and which missile doesn't matter. So, life is going to carry on. So we've just accepted that as our reality, and we continue. Now they are there, and then this bombing takes place and stuff. And I was impacted by that. Wasn't feeling very neutral at all. And yet I'm about to start a session. So rather than have my power be depleted, I go into this anchor of liberation. Neutral is power. And rather than react, I did message them, didn't get a response back for a while. And then finally I did get the message saying, yeah, we are hanging in there. And that was it. And I still felt there was something for me to do here. I wasn't even in Dubai. And so really what I did was I contacted the manager of their Michelin star restaurant here in Dubai and did what I could really do, which is just to see if they had anything that was showing up for them that they wanted to clear. There was chaos. And yet this restaurant, you have to wait for several months to get a booking. So my centered presence in amidst that chaos, which was only over the phone because I wasn't even on the country, really brought that centering into that team. They were just able to express wherever they were at. And then, the business continued. And this manager then, I empowered him on how to take it up with the UK guys, London guys, because I don't really know them at all. And they wouldn't have responded to me calling them in any way. But I could see how my centered presence actually spread very fast, even though the conversation was happening in complete chaos that was there. Because suddenly nobody felt they needed to react. Nobody felt they were entangled by uncertainty. Nobody felt they needed to be right or be rescued or come to a rescue. My centered presence wasn't me rescuing anything. I was just creating the space for them to become calm. And that's the payback of this particular anchor. The anchor of neutral is power. The need to be right or rescued just disappears. So then I looked at, okay, what was the practice that I did? I literally, all I did was ground myself, scan the lay of the land. And a lot of the lay of the land in scanning involved my own feelings. I named what I was feeling. without any attempt to fix it. Just simply naming it dissolved it. And then I was able to take very simple action. And then it was business as usual. And it's continuing that way. And really the impact in terms of time, what causes the time collapse when you work with this particular anchor, it is conflict cycles end fast. That's really what happens. And that is how the time collapse takes place. Very, very simple. I mean, I'm just so loving this body of work on the Age of Brilliance portals. Truly portals. They really get you to move forward with great speed. Neutral is power. So, Sarah, is there anything that is showing up for you? Anything you want to share? Anything you want to ask, elaborate from your perspective?
Yes, thank you. Two things have been coming up. One, before you got to neutral is power, and I've been trying to work out in my mind how the relationship. But what I kept getting, what was coming to me that kept coming to me is follow your North Star. Follow your North Star. So, and then when you introduce neutral as power and be in create centered presence, then I thought, well, if you're following your North Star, you're grounded. You have that calm, that ease, that for me, that feels like liberation. That gives you liberation. But then when you brought in the neutral as power about the centered presence, it is part of following your North Star. And maybe that's where others also, it gives them that centered presence. So that's one question, is sort of how does follow your North Star, be your North Star, relate to this? The second question is around time collapse. Could you share a bit more about what does that mean?
Hold the second question. The first one really is if you have if you have clarity about your North Star and you're following your North Star, that creates the context and the container within which everything occurs. So it's great to have that context. Now when you have that context, it becomes easier to utilize any of these anchors. Because you can be in the realm of the context before, and then it'll allow you to dissolve whatever requires to be dissolved in the realm of content. Because reaction is to do with content, not.
And what is the okay. And what's the relation? Is there a relationship between liberation and following or being your North Star?
When you operate from context, then you are liberated. Because you're not entangled by content. There will be multiple ways in which you can get to your North Star. Many of these things that I'm talking about, just the North Star literally takes you out of entanglement of any particular situation. I could have been, oh my God, they're not responding. They're actually really good at responding. I would be reaching out to Jill and to various other people. Have you heard from them? What good would that have served? Nothing. It would simply have just propagated an intense amount of worry. Holographically, it would have just multiplied. I did send them the message. And, I did name that I was anxious that they hadn't responded, and in amidst that, I couldn't move on from there and go and do a session on fear to freedom when it was like, whoa, I'm in the grips of fear, not feeling free myself, and I'm going to tell 100 people about transforming that. So some action was required from me. And then I used the liberation anchors as a way of taking that action. Now, the time collapse question.
Oh, the time collapses. I am not quite sure what that looks like or what that is. If you can
It basically
clarify.
means the way, what I mean by time collapse is whatever it is that you wish to have, rather than im imagining time as linear, that first this happens, then that happens, then that happens, then I get there. I'm saying, envision that the impact you wish to have for yourself and others, and be in that space and allow yourself to just take the next step next. So it could be something very simple, like I just did in June, I did the immersion in California, right? And there was someone who participated, and I actually taught them a process. There is a process to do time collapse. I taught them the process. Um, and many of these people were not in this realm at all. So it was like completely new to them. And one of them shared that he had agreed to pick up one of the participants at 8:45 on a Monday morning. And he left home and then realized that actually it's Monday morning, not Sunday morning. So he had left an hour later than he should have. And there was no way, because he could feel it, he could see it from the traffic. So there he is traveling from the Bay Area into Petaluma, and he's very present to the traffic. And of course, his past experience has been that he's going to get there at 9:45, not 8:45. And he says, okay, this is my chance to really practice the time collapse training. And that's what he did. And he was there outside our hotel at 8:45. And he kept saying, I don't know how it happened. I don't know how it happened. You know, he wasn't teleported there. It's just that purity of his intention and just focusing on taking the next step next, standing in the impact of what he was doing, being he's there at 8:45 outside her hotel to pick her up, right? Really, all that would have occurred is, for some reason, the cars in front of him would have changed lanes. I did that quite regularly. You remember when I was there in Wall Street for 18 months? We would often on the weekends go to the Hamptons, right? And everybody, I mean, all of these, Glenn and all of these other guys were just taking the helicopter service. And I liked that being driven there. I really liked that. And we would time collapse all the time, you know? And all that would happen is, 4 hour, 6 hour journey sometimes would for us, it would still be the maximum 2 hours because the cars in front of us would change lanes. That's time collapse happening in action right there. I mean, you've come to Bali with me, There have been many times we are going from, Ilang Ilang all the way to the waterfalls, right? And going up and navigating our way through the mountains, and there's a ceremony and everybody stopped, and we still get there in time and come back in time. We were doing time collapse all the time.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what I'm talking about is I'm starting to get into the nuances of time collapse, So by me saying that when you go into this particular anchor of neutral is power, the time collapse impact is that conflict cycles end fast. And that is what enables the time collapse to happen. So if there is a conflict and that, like you might have a claim or something about on some stuff, suddenly, neutral is power, powers you up. The conflict cycle dissolves. You just in the discussion about the agreement. I mean, I practiced this for real to actually get that crazy conflict with my ex-business partner to completely dissolve. I have no desire to be his friend or anything like that. But sitting in a conflict cycle didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
Stuff had to complete and end. With there's this one particular group that I've been working with, and in less than 6 months, they went from a collapsed buyout experience to actually having sold their business for $116 million. Their intention was to sell it between 110 to 120. So they did and the money was in the account in less than 6 months, where the deal had to be resurrected and brought back into the market. And this was 23rd of this 20, no, it was 16th of December is when we began. 16th of June, they had the money in their account. With a fabulous deal. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, but understanding the nuances of the impact of time collapse of each of these different elements really helped, you know? So neutral is power, it's conflict cycles ending fast, right? So, there was lots of, when you're doing a deal on a business, there's lots of toing and froing and that happens. Neutral is what powered this team up to make it happen. Reaction, polarity, entanglement wouldn't have done it. Synchronicity is flooding in when you go with the anchor of release to receive. You don't even know what those synchronicities are because you might never have done this before.
I think probably that's what she's been attempting to teach me all these years with my situation at school. And I've resisted because I just didn't get it. I didn't get that conflict cycles can end fast, and neutral is power. I guess it's taken me until today. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Practice
when you have something so huge occur, it's difficult to accept neutrality, right? And yet, what's the point in you disempowering yourself? All you want now is a deal to be concluded and done. So neutral is your power. So get into neutral and just take the next step next. Get across the finish line.
I guess I was too concerned. I didn't know what it was going to look like for the other party. But yes, okay.
It doesn't matter. How do you want it to look for you?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, this is the big one for you. The fourth anchor is completion is liberation. Now, what usually occurs before you work with this anchor, there's an energetic dragging of incomplete relationships, communications, duties. Everyone that I've done the autopilot work with, I always say, what is incomplete and messy in your life? Even naming it really does help the energetic dragging. Now, when you work with this anchor, completion is liberation. What occurs is you have clean endings, full releases. I do believe the work that I did with my ex-business partner, the cleanness of the ending of that is what enabled the full release to take place from my perspective. And everything like a domino occurred in a way that exceeded all our time expectations. Now, there is a challenge that can come up. The challenge is guilt can occur. Fear of disappointing can occur. But just know, anytime you dwell on any of this challenge, you are really disappointing yourself. The payback of completion is that clean energy and the fullness of experiencing your own presence. That is what powers you on. The fullness of my presence has been really, imperative for me to experience a couple of really big completions that I was going through. One with the ex-business partner, then there were investors in that business too. that also needed completion. Now, there is a way in which I often say to people, have a completion conversation. Sometimes you can't have a completion conversation with a person you wish to complete with. Find someone who will be willing to be a proxy. And if you can't do that, be with yourself, you know? And you can begin with these 3 completion statements, which are pretty powerful, which is I see you, and I thank you for taking on completion of this. And I just let you go. So if you've got stuff that is unsaid, and there is no one who will act as a proxy, and you do not wish to go and have that completion conversation with a person, or the person may not even be there to be able to have that conversation to complete, then you just, you can write these down for yourself, and then you just go with each one. I see you, I thank you, and I release you, or I let you go. The time collapse impact is huge because here, life, and remember, life is really you, and as an organism, breathing in and breathing out. So every breath you take realigns your life instantly. Now you can go and, conclude the deal. If you are incomplete, there is such heaviness and burden in you that if you are in the middle of a deal and you're wishing to conclude it, the other party feels the burden. They don't even get what it is that you're asking for, even though you may have written it down. So get that completion done. And then life realigns instantly. And that is how the time collapse in terms of conclusion of the deal takes place. There were many, many, many completion conversations, which were like really direct conversations within the CXO team, as well as with the investment banker that needed to occur, as well as with the investors themselves that needed to occur with this other group that I was working with and advising. There were hardcore nuances to do with the deal, and there was quite a lot of this kind of energetic work, that we were also doing. So that with clean energy, fullness of presence, allowing the realignment to take place instantly, opening up for synchronicity to appear, the deals kept closing. We took the big deal and really made it into small little ones, so that there was a cadence around conclusion of the deal, conclusion of the deal, conclusion of the deal. The 5th anchor it's a really great one, really great one. And it is one of the 3 things that we are born with, which is the choice over chains. Remember, we are the 3 things we are born with. We are born with choice. You are always choosing. Even if you choose to make no choice, you are choosing that. Even if you choose to hand over the choice to someone else, or I had no choice, you're choosing that. So the way the scenario might occur before you take on and work with this anchor, you might be acting from obligation or some pattern, an autopilot pattern, or from fear, false expectations appearing real. When you harness the power that lies within this particular anchor of liberation, you become conscious and sovereign in your decisions. The challenge that you might experience is that when you start choosing differently, it may disappoint others. That can happen. But all you have to do is to choose to notice how you're experiencing that disappointment in others. You can slide into reacting to that or really honoring them to feel that disappointment and reconnecting to the choice that you've made. The benefit is massive. You literally get into the realm of self-leadership and flow returns. If you find yourself sliding into the situation where you feel, well, I don't quite know how this is going to pan out, and it feels disempowering, this is the practice that you can do. Pause and choose. Sorry. And the question you're going to ask is, what is true for me right now? What is true for me now? And just simply that answer in itself activates a time collapse impact where your inner autopilot saboteur collapses. Your source mastery activates. It's a really extremely powerful one. Choice over chains. Choice is liberating and you're born with it. When you're not reclaiming that, when you're not acting out of you are the choice in your matter, then you are literally, applying those chains and you're getting yourself entangled in it. That conscious sovereign decisions are not happening. Self-leadership is not active. You are out of flow. There is no opportunity for time collapse to occur. The sixth one. And we will stop here today. The sixth one is the anchor is no thing owns me. No thing owns me. Now, before, the way that might have occurred before you work with this anchor, you may be in a space of being owned by your fears. And the fears could be around money, around relationships, around identity, various fears. So really owned by your expectations that are appearing real. Remember, I talk about fear as false expectations appearing real. The reality is every expectation is an expectation. It's not real. So being owned by your expectations comes in the way of liberation, big time. Once you really accept this anchor of no thing owns me, you relate to things. You work with them. You're not owned by them. You work with people. You collaborate or co-create. They don't own you. You work with cultures. You work with, whatever the rules might be, but you don't allow that to own you. There is a lightness of being that you continue with. There could be a challenge. I mean, if you're very used to, living in the realm that in a relationship context, if you're very used to that codependency, when you declare no thing owns me, you may land up facing emptiness or a void. That can happen. The benefit is ultimate autonomy. So the practice that you could do, this is my classic, write and burn and dissolve practice. What you can do if you feel quite trapped in this situation where you feel that there are certain relationships or certain situations that really do define your own sense of self-liberation, just make a list of what you believe owns you, what you believe, holds you. Burn it in a pan, add water to it, watch it dissolve, and just pour the mixture of, ash and water into the soil and anchor liberation as your new state. The time collapse impact, this is a very powerful way of dissolving your karmic patterns. So look at patterns that you may have allocated as karmic patterns. There might be some karma here, And a lot of the times, especially if there is something that you feel wronged about, and Sarah, you'll be able to relate to this, in our quest of being right about it, we allow it to start owning us. And that stops us from moving forward. So this very simple practice of what owns me, holding the intention that you're actually going to apply the power of the elements and let it dissolve. But until you actually name it and get it out of your field, it can still continue to own you. Again, another powerful one that shows up in the recalibration of your health and well-being. We are on time, so I'm going to pass on to you. We're just beyond time. I'm going to pass on to you, Sarah, to complete, and we will continue this next week.
Wow. Well, I feel the presence of liberation, and yeah, I actually feel it. I'm wondering if everybody else kind of feels what liberation. I think the layers of liberation and how liberation, perhaps before we came into this conversation, I didn't exactly feel in a bodily, embodied way, liberation. So that's something I'll leave with everyone who's been participating on the call. And yeah, it's very powerful. Well, it's all very powerful, each step, each element. And nothing owns me, I'm finding in the chains, that choice over chains. I feel a real flow that comes with liberation. I think what for me, what's coming up is the embodiment. I'm starting to feel that embodiment of liberation, and thank you for that. Because before the conversation, liberation was a context and a word.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel embodied in liberation. And I'm starting to feel that flowing through me now.
Wonderful, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to see if I can get 2-3 hours of a little bit more sleep. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
To be continued.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaste.
you, Manu.
Thank you.